Good morning. Welcome to this service of the Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church. We're glad you are here. The host will mute everyone, and when it's your turn to speak, be sure to unmute yourself. And now David Chapman is going to bring us our opening music, Sunrise, by Michael Jones.
That was beautiful. It really did feel like a sunrise. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to worship at Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church. We acknowledge that the land on which our church stands is part of the ancestral grounds of the Piscataway people. I am Diana McFadden, one of several worship associates who plan services in collaboration with church staff. I am very happy that you are here with us today. If you are using Zoom this morning, please run your cursor over the perimeter of your screen to find the microphone icon and be sure to remain muted throughout the service so we can all hear the speakers and David's piano clearly. By moving your cursor around the edges of your screen, you may also find the option for switching between gallery view and speaker view. I believe you will want to choose speaker view, as I do. Clicking on the bubble icon opens up the chat screen where you can read timely messages during the service and also from our assistant church administrator, Phil Brown. Right now, I invite you to type into chat how many people are viewing from your screen. Please just type 1 if it is just you. Later in the service, you will be invited to use the chat feature to post your joys and sorrows. At the end of today's service, you will have the option of joining a small chat group in a breakout room when the service is over, by staying on Zoom. After the service, also this time, Reverend Russell will invite us to join together in the main room to reflect on the horrific events that transpired last week, the racial overtones and implications for our country, especially Wednesday night. I plan to be there myself. Did you know that Paint Branch has its own YouTube channel? All of our online services from the past 2 months are posted there. Go to YouTube and search for Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church and you will find them. Just like our other services, today is being recorded. Now, Reverend Russell Savage will call us to worship.
At the end of this week, in which the very foundations of our nation have been shaken and continue to shake, we need one another more than ever. We give thanks for the opportunity to gather once again, even in this online way, to share our mutual support. Come, let us worship together. We begin by singing together, "Come Sing a Song with Me."
Good morning, Paint Branch. I'm Liz Citron, your guest chalice lighter for this morning. Good morning. I can't tell if you can hear me.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. As I said, I'm Liz Citron, your guest chalice lighter for this morning. Here is our chalice, which I'm going to light. And now, please join me in reciting the words of our Unison chalice lighting. We light the chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind, the helping hands, the loving heart, and the radiant spirit. Encendamos estas Chalice para celebrar el unitarismo universalismo. Esta es la iglesia de la mente abierta, de las manos amigas, del amor, del corazón y del espíritu radiante.
Good morning, my good people. I'm Chris McCann, your religious educator. How I have missed all of you and how good it is to be together today. When I learned on Wednesday morning that our worship theme today was hope, I was excited. As most of you know, I'm a pretty hopeful person. One could even say that I'm in the hope business, as are most people who work with children. As the day unfolded, I, a person in the hope business, grew numb. I had so many feelings that I reached a limit on my ability to process one more thing, and I shut down. I told my husband on Friday morning that I was at a loss for what to say during my time in worship because I simply could not locate my hope. After some reflection, I realized that innate sense of hope didn't leave me all at once on Wednesday. Rather, it's been chipped away for the last 4 years. And the chipping away has sort of gone into overdrive since March and all that has happened in our country since. This was rather a pickle, because on Saturday, I was to speak to our kids at family worship about hope and what it means and what they hope for. When we gathered, I asked the kids why hope was important. And the consensus was that hope is important because people can do great things with hope, even stop wars. Hope makes things possible, because without hope, people wouldn't even try to do great things. After my time with the wisest and bestest people that I know, I thought about people doing great things. And since my sense of hope has been slowly eroded, it will take time to restore it to full function. So here are some things that have brought me hope whenever my mind wanders to them. I think of Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church and how hope is by and large what has brought me back to you. I think of Dr. George Washington Carver, whose agricultural work was so much more far-reaching than his work with the peanut, for which he is best known. But when asked why the peanut, he responded, "If you love it enough, anything will talk to you." I think of Dr. Jonas Salk and his polio vaccine. His work was so effective that my brother had the pucker mark from the vaccine on his arm. I, born 5 years later, do not. I think of his refusal to patent the vaccine. He likely could have made a great deal of money for the patent, and when asked why he wouldn't, he asked in return, "Can you patent the sun?" I think of Dr. Anthony Fauci, quietly doing his work at the CDC, helping to keep us all safe, and doing that so effectively for so many years that most of us had never heard of him before this year. Now that he's been thrust into the spotlight and even made a villain by some, he's still doing his work, helping to keep us all safe. These people and countless others likely would have never tried if they didn't have a sense of hope that their work might be helpful, even meaningful. I know that right now it seems near impossible to restore hope in larger things, in our institutions, in justice, in public accountability and consequences. That's all going to take a while. It's my hope that in the coming days, weeks, and months, we can all take a moment to think about any small things that reminds us of hope and leads us to locating in ourselves. Now, please join in singing hymn number 95, "There Is More Love Somewhere."
Hello again, everyone. Today, the theme of our service is hope, and it seems more appropriate than ever. Hope brightens our way and leads us, and of all the living and sentient beings on earth, it is likely that we humans are the only ones who know of hope and of despair. This is so because both hope and despair have to do with our expectations for the future. And the future is a complex intellectual concept, probably not shared by other beings. So, what does hope mean to us in these troubling times? Well, hope and expectations are very closely related, often accompany each other, but they are so significantly different. Last week on Wednesday the 6th, we wept for our country as a horrific attack on our capital transpired. But now I'm more hopeful than ever, than I've been for years, actually, because it's all been laid so bare over the past few years, some of the flaws in our country that have always been there. And were even created at its conception, the racist overtones. So many, but since last Wednesday and over the past few years, more and more Americans have expressed such disgust and anger, particularly about the attack that all came to a head. And so many more are awake, and I would hope, including the many, many Americans who have experienced and benefited quietly from unseen privileges conferred by our system. That night reminded me that I do love our country and realize how great it can be, that I am patriotic. It is shocking to see the flaws in our country's foundation, some of which have existed since its beginning. Ugly facts and flaws have been stripped bare. But now, more of us understand what needs to be changed because we can see more of it. It's shocking at first, but many more are working to do that. So I have hope for our country and all of us here. Hope is a desire for something to happen. An expectation refers to something that you think will happen, even if you don't want it to happen. It really hadn't occurred to me before, the difference between hope and expectations. It's a subtle but significant nuance. In his book, The Awakened Heart, Dr. Gerald May tells us the difference between expectation and hope. He defines expectation as a rigid clinging to belief, to sometimes unreal belief. Expectation is demanding exactly what we want to have happen, regardless of what is actually happening. Expectations are fixed and frozen, limited to previous experiences and what we have been told or promised, and they do not adjust to reality. When expectations are unmet, we often, quote, didn't see it coming. Hope, on the other hand, is the wish for an outcome, for something to happen. Hope might be based on expectations, but it is independent from them because hope responds to all situations. It can be adjusted. Instead of battling against an outcome that was expected to be different, hope is flexible and alive. Hope is agile, adjusting naturally with reality and outcomes, while allowing for growth or change. It often desires good for another, a positive outcome, unlike expectations. Hope is not limited by previous experiences, and we can always hope for a better outcome. Our imaginations and dreams influence our hopes, and our hopes can change our goals. Hope does not die if it goes unmet. So a dashed hope really can be a hope deferred, not destroyed. We may need to adjust our hopes, but we can always keep hoping. It's different from the soul-crushing sensation of unmet expectations. In fact, I have often seen breakups described as soul-crushing, a soul-crushing breakup. Why? Because it is expectations that breakups usually shatter, leaving a mess of shards and a broken heart behind, which takes a long time to clean up. Hope helps us keep moving forward, and hope fills us with life. As for expectations, for all the misery they can cause, what purposes can they serve? Well, for one thing, they're a reality. We can't help ourselves. Expectations happen. But how can we harness them with our hopes? Expectations result from our experiences and understandings. They can and do serve great purpose as well because they provide a realistic basis for our hopes to help us determine a more effective way forward. As a 15-year paint brancher, I have been uplifted over the years by the concentration and diversity of talent, knowledge, and passion within Paint Branch alone, and compassion too. When the words when the words of our experiences are fortified by diligence and determination. Paint Branch is really bigger than its size, and I am the better person for it. Nearly a year ago, we began to develop visions for our beloved church home before COVID suspended everything. There are exciting options for our meeting house that could really help Paint Branch expand culturally as well as physically in numbers. However, obstacles challenge us to be confident that we will find or create ways to realize these visions. Since its founding over 60 years ago, Paint Branch has evolved and grown, and it has sustained, survived, and thrived over several challenges and traumas over the years, including a devastating fire. Our beautiful home expresses our connection and love with nature. It encourages community, celebration, and care that promotes seeking and learning. Together, we paint branchers now have arrived at the dawn of a new era yet to be known, beginning with a call for developmental ministry to refresh, recreate, to clear our vision, and to realize our strengths and transform our weaknesses. So we will grow in diversity and size, as we will be more able to reach out and invite more who seek our messages of community and diversity and exploration, but they haven't found us yet. Among our congregation, heated, healthy debate and questioning have arisen in the wake of Reverend Rachel's departure, among other transitions. My hope is that we will listen to one another and learn from one another and understand the roots of different expectations among us and what our hopes are. Our respective concerns and, yes, expectations can inform our hopes and help guide us, as long as we listen and learn as much as we speak and declare. Paint Branch has been here for us, including long before many of us who are here now. It has been here as a place of hope, healing, inspiration, growth, and sometimes change. But that is so because we have been there for Paint Branch over time, at those times of Paint Branch's needs. Otherwise, there would be no Paint Branch here for us. Because we are Paint Branch, in Paint Branch, our shared hopes, dreams, and quests are greater than the sum of their parts as we join together. Paint Branch is a living, vibrant community. Right now, We can't be sure what direction we will take or how we will transform, but it seems that we are ready, and the guidance we receive in the coming years will serve to brighten and broaden our view. With the diverse concerns, ideas, visions, and expectations woven together in our shared hope, we won't just find a way into the next era. We will also create a way, our way. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jim Flaherty, and I'm one of 3 pastoral care associates here at Paint Branch, along with Kathy Bartolomeo and Lynn Lewison. Our role is to offer presence and caring to anyone in our congregation who may be facing difficult challenges. I want to remind you that Reverend Russ is available for pastoral counseling, and the 3 of us on the pastoral care team can be in touch by phone for listening and support. Our contact information will be posted now in the chat. Let's now take the next few minutes for the sharing of joys and sorrows. We join our hearts and minds in a time of prayer and meditation. As we gather in worship, we carry with us life's hurts and its great joys. Sometimes sharing these joys and sorrows in community can help strengthen the bonds between us and ease our burdens. Now, with open hearts, I invite you to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. For the intonation, David will play "I Know This Rose Will Open," composed by Mary Gregolia and arranged by Cliff Harden. We'll now allow for a short period of silence to acknowledge what has been shared, as well as those joys and sorrows that were not expressed, yet remain on our minds and in our hearts. May we hold one another in love and kindness, so that this congregation may be a source of strength and comfort, courage and hope in the days and weeks ahead.
Our hearts are broken again. On Wednesday, we were glued to our television screens, watching in horror as thugs and terrorists stormed the United States Capitol, the shrine of our nation. They smashed windows and burst into the building, entering the chambers of both houses, waving Trump flags and Confederate flags and signs saying, "Stop the steal." The elected members of the legislature had to be hurriedly escorted out to a safe place for most of the afternoon. It was impossible not to notice that the rioters were almost entirely white, and that police officers treated them gently when they interacted with them. We remember in contrast the treatment of Black Lives Matter demonstrators who were met with water cannons, pepper spray, and rubber bullets when the president wanted to go and have his picture taken holding a Bible in front of a church. Last Wednesday, other nations watched in horror as the United States, for centuries a beacon of democracy, civility, and hope, acted like a banana republic. The people who did this had been specifically directed to do it by the President of the United States at a rally that morning. In such a situation, how can we have hope? I want to talk about hope this morning. For many years, I had a cat. When I went home, she would greet me at the door. I was the one who usually fed her, and I always played with her for a minute when I came into the house. She anticipated that I would be coming home and waited for me. Anticipation is based upon a projection from past experience. The person who feeds me and plays with me and comes home every day, so I anticipate he'll come home today too. Now, I want to clarify the distinction between anticipation and hope. Anticipation looks to the past and assumes that what happened in the past will happen again. My cat could do that. Hope, on the other hand, creates something new, something which has never happened before. It depends upon the use of our imagination. Hope depends upon the arrow of time, knowing that things can be different in the future from the way they have been in the past. As human beings, we alone among the creatures of the universe have some understanding of the flow of time, however dim and incomplete that understanding may be. We understand that gross movement of time which we call history. We study and read about it and know something of our place in it. We understand the smaller movements of time, which are our lives, and even periods within our lives. In some way, we understand that the future, even though we cannot see it, is contained in the present, just as a flower, even though we cannot see it, is contained in a seed. The future is not always simply a projection of the past. Something new can happen. Because we understand the arrow of time, the flow of history, we alone among the creatures of the universe have the capacity for hope and for despair. Hope and despair are but narratives of the future. They are not necessarily just projections of the past, but new narratives created from our own imaginations. If we are comfortable with ourselves, with our lot in life, and with what is happening around us, with what is happening in our country, those narratives are likely to be ones of hope. If we are not comfortable with ourselves and with our lot in life, those narratives will probably be ones of despair. Our future narratives arise out of the hand which has been dealt to us in life, of course, but they also arise out of our deepest understanding of ourselves and whether we feel accepted. We might well each ask of ourselves then, what is the story of our own future? That story will be different as we believe we are or are not accepted for who we are. One who feels known and accepted can survive almost any hand dealt by life. Some people with terminal medical diagnoses are nevertheless able to consider the future with hope. Some whose diagnoses are not all that serious are nevertheless filled with despair. One who does not feel known and accepted may withdraw from life and from participation in it. Such a person may suffer from depression or other psychoses. One who sees no possibility of acceptance for who he or she is may even attempt suicide. The ultimate narrative, of course, is the one we imagine around the end of our own lives. What will the end of life be like? And what will the world be like when we are no longer here? Will that narrative be one of hope and victory, or one of despair and defeat? There's a wonderful line about this in a prayer in the Book of Common Prayer. It doesn't say, protect us from death, for none of us can be protected from death. It says instead, protect us from death unprepared for. All of life, in one sense, is simply a preparation for death. That preparation includes getting a clear understanding of our narrative about the end of life and its meaning. The religious traditions of the world provide their followers with narratives for death and what follows. Hinduism, for example, teaches that the soul of a departed one might return in another being, another person, or perhaps even an animal. This understanding is the foundation of the Hindu respect for all forms of life, for even a housefly might contain the soul of an ancestor. Christianity teaches hope for a life after death, and its scriptures even describe the heaven in which this will be lived out, a place with pearly gates and streets paved with gold. Some of the descriptions you can find in the book of Revelation are quite remarkable. Religious narratives like these can provide comfort, guidance, and hope to their followers. But there can also be a drawback to these comforting narratives. In promising relief, comfort, and justice in some life after this earthly one, they give us a way of ignoring the imperative for social justice in this life. If everything is going to be sorted out and made right in heaven, then we can ignore the poverty and racism and suffering and cruelty and injustice we see around us. The scientific rationalist, the logical positivist, the modern-day humanist have a different narrative about the end of life. That is that the world will be different when we are gone because we have been here. Our lives, our work, our accomplishments will be remembered and will live on. And so, in a sense, we will live on. And this is a narrative of hope. But what about despair? When there is no expectation of being accepted for what we are, when there is no expectation of comfort or peace, when we see the fabric of our country being torn apart before our very eyes, when there is no expectation that our lives will have made the least bit of difference in the world, then there is no hope. And when there is no hope, the vacuum is filled with its opposite, which is despair. Despair, like hope, arises out of the narrative in which we see ourselves living out our lives. That narrative, if it is one of despair, can be reframed. Even the narrative about death can be reframed, turned on its head from one of defeat and despair to one of victory and hope. What can all of this tell us about these turbulent times in which we are living? If we are concerned about the unraveling of our country, must we simply give up in despair? Let us remember that in only 10 days, we will have a new administration, one which is pledged to govern in a very different way from the past 4 years. If we are concerned about the racism which we see all around us, let us remember that the death of George Floyd this past year illuminated that disparity for all to see, and we are at last beginning a national conversation about race. If we are concerned about the devastation of the coronavirus, must we simply fall into despair? You all know this. At present, about 4,000 Americans are dying of it every day. More than 370,000 have already died, and experts are telling us the winter is going to be very bad. It seems to me the answer to that depends on whether we take a stance of anticipation or a stance of hope. If we take a stance of anticipation, like my cat, we will simply wait for the same thing to happen tomorrow that happened today, that more and more people will die. That would be depressing indeed. But if we take a stance of hope, we can imagine that something different can happen tomorrow. Vaccines are now becoming available. My daughter is a geriatric social worker, and so she's classified as a healthcare worker. She got her coronavirus shot yesterday. A stance of hope has an element of participation in it, unlike anticipation, which just involves waiting. From a standpoint of hope, we can take part in shaping the future which lies before us. At present, that means we can wear our masks, avoid indoor gatherings, keep our distance from others even when we're outdoors, wash our hands frequently. When the vaccine becomes available to us, we can be sure to get a shot. Now, how does all of this play out for us here at Paint Branch UU Church? We look back with fondness at the halcyon days of the past with Dick Kelly, with Jocko and Barbara, with Diane, with Rachel. And what has happened? Somehow, things have fallen apart. We are angry at each other. Since I arrived in November, quite a number of members have resigned from this church. I have been in touch with each one of them by phone or by email. They had complaints like, I didn't like the way the board did its job, or I didn't like the culture of secrecy around here, or I didn't like the way people of color are treated here. What they were all really saying is, I couldn't stand the pain. I couldn't stand the pain. Each of us is in pain. We must minister to one another. Over the coming days, I invite you to think about your story, our story, the story of this church and of our country and even the world. What is your future narrative about our collective destiny and your part in it? About your own inevitable movement toward death and that which lies beyond death? What role are you called to play as these narratives unfold? Remember that you have the power to act and to frame a narrative of hope, whether it is based on religious belief or your own rational thought or some combination of those. You have the power to frame a story in which you are victorious even over death itself, in which we are victorious, even against overwhelming odds. May that power grasp each one of us and hold us as the days of our lives unfold. Amen. And now in the silence, let us listen for that voice, still and small, which lives within us all.
Voice singing in dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears through all the years, singing.
Thank you, Sherry. That was beautiful. And that also reminds me of all the talent we have here in Paint Branch. This Sunday's offering will be received using our Breeze online donation page at pbreezechms.com/give/online. Or you can mail your check to the church, or you can text the whole dollar amount of your donation to 301-321-7215. Thank you.
Now may the blessing of truth be upon us, the power of love direct us and sustain us, and may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this time forth until we meet again. We close by singing together Fuente de Amor, Spirit of Life.
We will now extinguish our chalice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning.